Do you think Mekies will pick up the baton and carry on where Horner left off?
There are really big things he needs to address immediately.
Without Max Verstappen, Red Bull would be last in the Constructors' Championship.
Max at the moment seems to be the glue that's just holding this whole team together right now.
Is the momentum, guys, with Lando or with Oscar at the halfway stage?
Now it's become increasingly clear that it's going to be probably a two-horse race. It kind of starts now, the real title battle between the two.
I think Lando might find a run and just put 3 or 4 races together, which will decide the shape of the title.
What about Ferrari then?
This is Lewis Hamilton, guys. This was a big money signing to get Ferrari back on the top step, and they are miles away from it.
How much more can Sauber achieve this year? Are they a genuine threat to Williams' P5?
We're seeing Nico Hülkenberg living his best life, and I think when you've got Nico on song like this, he can generate incredible consistency.
Do you know what his average grid position is when he's getting those points? 16 and a half.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's not even making Q2, guys, and he's getting through to the points.
12 races down and 12 to go. We're halfway through the 2025 Formula One season, and what a year it's been so far. Welcome to F1 Nation. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me on the show is former Renault driver turned F1 TV commentator Jolyon Palmer and F1 correspondent and presenter Lawrence Barretto. Guys, thanks for your time. First up, how are you both?
Very good. It's flown by, hasn't it, the first half of the season? I can't believe we're already there. But yeah, well, and enjoying a couple of weeks between races.
Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks, TC and Jolyon. Yeah, I've loved the season up until this point. I'm actually quite sad that the summer break is almost upon us because it feels like it's just started to get a bit spicy.
That's a good point. Well, look, in this show, we're going to discuss what we've learned from the first half of the season and what we can expect from the second half. Let's start, though, with Red Bull Racing. Christian Horner is no longer their team principal and CEO, replaced by Racing Bull's Laurent Mekies. I recorded an emergency F1 Nation with F1 TV's lead commentator Alex Jakes, reacting to that last week. But let's now get your take on the situation at Red Bull and what their future looks like. Lawrence, what was your reaction when you heard that Horner was out?
It was one of shock, TC. I think that over the course of the British Grand Prix weekend, as difficult as that one was for Red Bull, there wasn't really an inkling that this was coming. So when the news dropped, it seemed like Red Bull had a plan. You know, he left with immediate effect. Laurent Mekies came in to replace him. Alain Permain stepped up to replace Laurent as team principal at Racing Bulls. So it felt like, from that perspective, Red Bull had a plan, and it was all happening very quickly. In terms of why it's happened right now, well, Red Bull have obviously had a really difficult season up until this point. Max has a couple of wins this year, but they've actually only had 4 wins in the last 26 Grand Prix. They're fourth in the championship. They've scored 200 points less than they did at this time last year, and they are essentially out of contention of both championships. So if you look at pure performance, you can understand potentially why Red Bull would want to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, surprised at the timing. I think, you know, there's been a lot of fallout at Red Bull the last 18 months. So there's been many high-profile names leaving the team, including Adrian Newey and Jonathan Wheatley. And I think there was a sense that with things falling away this year, Christian was under pressure. But I completely agree that the timing and the suddenness of this post-Silverstone, I think it's caught everyone off guard. And I feel like it leaves Red Bull in a real tight spot as well, in terms of obviously Laurent stepping up. But it's a big job for him because Red Bull is such a different beast to the B team.
And the team is very much a reflection of Christian Horner. He hasn't missed a single race of Red Bull's 405 starts to date. Do you think Mekies will just pick up the baton and carry on where Horner left off, or do you think his job description is slightly different now?
I think his job description has to be different because Christian was such a huge part of the Red Bull operation. You know, it began with Christian 20 years ago, and the influence that he's had across the business. They're obviously making their powertrain next year. I think to then come in as someone else and try and step into those shoes and try and repeat all of that is going to be a big job. But I think that's probably not what Red Bull management will want from Laurent. I think they'll want him to come in and run the team in the way that he wants to run the team. He's had quite an incredible rise, you know, from 2 years ago, he was with Ferrari, then gone to his first team principal job at Racing Bulls, the sister team. And now he's team principal CEO of one of the biggest teams in the sport. So, look, they must believe that he is capable of doing it. What I know from my dealings with Laurent is that he's very well liked within the Red Bull family. So that's the wider energy drinks firm. He's very well liked within the sister team, which he actually began his career when it was Toro Rosso and had all of those times there. And he is very well respected amongst his contemporaries within the paddock. So I think they will hope that he will come in and he'll steady that ship. That I think that he will quickly galvanise a team that will be in a bit of confusion, I guess, with this change. You know, having got used to Christian coming in every day as the boss, I think they'll trust Laurent to be able to steady that ship and run things. And effectively, he's got half a year just to get through to the end of the year before this regulation change. So at least he's got some time to try and get his feet under the table at a time when there won't be that much expectation on the team, given where they are at the minute.
But there are really big things he needs to address immediately. And the driver lineup is obviously one of them. And Max Verstappen's contract and all the rumours falls in the same time as Christian is ousted from the team. So I think that's one thing that Laurent, with the hierarchy at Red Bull, need to try and knuckle down. Can they keep their star driver? Because Max at the moment seems to be the glue that's just holding this whole team together right now. If you take out Max from Red Bull, they've lost all the old management. Helmut Marko's still there in an advisory capacity, but a lot of the race team have gone from senior positions. Yet Max is still able to deliver pole position at Silverstone. He's still able to direct the team. GP is obviously now going to be a central figure as well, who's got a great relationship with Max. But, you know, the other drivers are a big question mark as well. And that's where Laurent has got some great experience working with Yuki Tsunoda before and others to try and sort out what's going on there. But the whole dynamic of the drivers is probably his first thing to try and get on top of.
And turn this into a two-car team. I mean, without Max Verstappen, Red Bull would be last in the Constructors' Championship this year. That is how significant his influence is. And yes, he's worked with Yuki Tsunoda before, but it's kind of more than just getting the best out of Yuki, isn't it? We've seen over the last 7 years or so, ever since Daniel Ricciardo left the team, that second car hasn't performed anything like as effectively as the first car. And I think that has to be Mekies', if not job number one, but very near the top of the list, is to get it operating as a two-car team, to get this team properly challenging for the Constructors' Championship, because you can't, when you look at the effectiveness of McLaren, you can't compete with them if you've only got one car.
No, and to be fair, I do think that there was chatter over the course of the British Grand Prix weekend about the necessity to do that internally, to not have a car that is designed so heavily towards Max. So we'll have to wait and see for 2026 and beyond whether or not that is going to be the case. But I think trying to dial that out this year, given the way that teams will be turning their taps off on car development this year, is going to potentially be a step too far. I think to Jolyon's point about Laurent's experience with drivers, I think that will probably help Max as well as Yuki. I think Max has been across everything. I feel all of the big decisions that have happened, he will have been made aware of all of them. I'm sure he would have been made aware of the Christian news as well. I understand he had a meeting with Mintzlaff over the course of the British Grand Prix weekend as well. So I think that he will be across it. Whether or not he feels like the change and the new strategy of Austrian management going forward is enough, maybe that will be enough, and that Laurent will just then have to manage that. I think Laurent can make a big step with Yuki, put his arm around him in the way that he did when he was at Racing Bulls. And I think Yuki was at his best when he was managed by Laurent and when he was managed by Franz Tost before. So I think from an immediacy perspective, I think that will help Yuki try and get to terms with a car that is going to continue to be difficult to drive. He is clearly confused with that machine, and I think Laurent, because he is so technically invested in the team and he loves racing so much, will be able to get stuck into that a little bit more with Yuki, and I think potentially in the coming races that might help.
That's a good point. He's an engineer by trade, is Laurent Mekies. And look, final thoughts on what's coming up for this racing team. I wanted to discuss Red Bull powertrains. It was very much Christian Horner's baby. He was the driving force behind Red Bull powertrains when it came into being, what was it now, more than 2 years ago. How much do you think Mekies is going to get involved in that? Do you think they're going to want to have a separate CEO for powertrains? I thought it was interesting at the weekend at Silverstone when Horner said it would be embarrassing for Mercedes if powertrains were better than them next year. I thought that was very open and honest, too honest probably, in the world of Formula One. But do you see him getting involved in powertrains as much as the racing team?
I think Laurent will go in and he'll want to get the racing team figured out first. So it might be that the wider Red Bull management will look to bolster the senior management around Laurent going forward. Given the fact that this has happened all quite quickly, I imagine there are probably still questions to be answered around that internally anyway. I don't think they've got this roadmap planned out exactly just yet. I think it's only been less than a couple of days since it's all happened. I think there'll be things that they will have to work through, but it feels like this is maybe the first step of many steps that they're going to have to make to getting this team back towards the powerhouse that they were when they were winning championships just a couple of years ago. So I think they probably will have to consider that. It would be a big job for Laurent, I think, to run the racing team and have an oversight over the power unit facility, just because it is so green. And that obviously isn't his area of expertise. So I think that probably is something that Austrian senior management will have to discuss.
Because of all the success that Red Bull have had, and very recently, the way the wheels have fallen off the wagon, it's been pretty extreme, given there's been no major overhaul of regulations that we've seen in the past. To take over what is an established front-running team, and as you say, TC, without Max at the moment, they're tail-enders. So to try and work out how to make the car drivable, then put the right drivers in, is a really big undertaking. And then you've got the powertrains as well that's on the other side of it, which is on the horizon for next year, which is a major unknown for the whole team. And they've got such a good working relationship as well with Honda they've had for such a long time, and they've been really competitive with it. So that's just something else that there's a risk for them and tough timing probably for Laurent.
Support for today's episode comes from Square, the easy way for business owners to take payments, book appointments, manage staff, and keep everything running smoothly from one place. It's like having a pit crew for your business, fast, efficient, and ready when you need it. Whether you're brewing coffee, running a retail shop, or selling at a pop-up, the last thing you want is a card reader letting you down when the pressure's on. I've noticed Square popping up in so many different places while travelling for this first leg of the season. Local cafes, food stalls, restaurants, you name it. As a customer, it's always quick, easy, and it just works. Tap to pay, instant receipts, and I'm out the door. I love the simplicity and the speed. But for a business owner, Square is so much more. Square means you can sell anywhere, on your phone, at the counter, wherever your business takes you. Everything syncs up so you can track sales, manage inventory, and access reports in real time, whether you're in your shop or on the go. With Square, you get all the tools to run your business, with none of the contracts or complexity. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/F1 Nation. That's Square, SQUARE.com/GO/F1 Nation. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. Well, if it's all change at Red Bull, let's talk about a team who are heading towards back-to-back constructors' titles, McLaren. They're 238 points clear of second-place Ferrari. Oscar Piastri leads teammate Lando Norris by 8 points at the top of the drivers' standings. Is the momentum, guys, with Lando or with Oscar at the halfway stage?
I think, it's 50-50. It's beautifully set at an 8-point difference and a 50-50 split. That's where we're at, which I think, Lando has pulled it back in the last couple of weekends, but those weekends have been really, really a toss-up whether Oscar's going to take this right away from him or Lando narrows the gap. So you've got Austria, they're wheel-to-wheel for 20 laps. Oscar takes the lead momentarily, and if he holds on to that lead, the gap's going to balloon out. Instead, Lando manages to outrace him and then win the race. And then Silverstone, the penalty that I think is really harsh on Oscar. It's a tough decision that falls towards Lando. So the performance gap between them is so close, but the last two races have just brought it down. But I still think that performance-wise, it's a split between them.
Well, who's done the better job in the opening half of the season? Does that 8-point lead for Piastri reflect that he's done slightly the better job?
I think so. I think he's done it. Well, you got to remember also where he's come from. This was a Norris team really last year. I know Piastri had some great days, a couple of wins, but Lando was the number one. He won the Constructors' Championship for them on the final day, winning the race, and he always seemed like he was going to be ahead. And then Melbourne came, and he delivered a win from pole position as well. So I think the fact that Oscar's managed to turn this around, even if they were split level, I think that's a win for Oscar right now after 12 races. So he's been very impressive. The question is then going to be about momentum and whether Lando can just find that form again that he showed last year to take it away.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Oscar has had the better season. I think if you asked Lando, he'd probably say the same, because I think Lando will feel he's made far too many mistakes this year, and that has meant that he's fallen behind Oscar in the championship. I think I would agree with Jolyon in terms of it is kind of 50-50, but I think looking at it a different way, Oscar's kind of just been on the same level the whole way through, mentally tough, doesn't seem phased when things go well or badly, whereas Lando's obviously more peaky, and I think therefore, given the last two races and the way they've gone, I think that momentum will help Lando more than that consistency that Oscar's kind of enjoying at the minute. And I think Lando will probably always be this confidence driver, this driver who needs to continually prove to himself that he's got what it takes to deliver. And I think in races like Silverstone, where he probably shouldn't have won, without that penalty, and he has won, I think he'll see that as maybe a chance where things have gone in his favour. And I think if that continues, and that's what he's going to have to do, I think, this year to beat Oscar, he's going to have to continually find ways to win when he shouldn't win. That's probably going to be the way that he's going to have to beat an Oscar who has barely made a mistake this year.
You say Lando's more peaky. Are his peaks higher than Oscar's?
I think so far this year, yes, but I don't think it's a fair comparison in the sense that Oscar's obviously newer to Formula One than Lando is. Lando's got more experience than him, so maybe Oscar's earlier in his journey. But if you're doing a like-for-like comparison, I think that Lando has had enough evidence, even if it's just by a couple of millimetres. He has had stronger weekends when he's had really strong weekends.
I don't know. Oscar's had some unblemished weekends as well. When you think of some of the the pressure that he's been under in races, but he just seems like he's cruising up front. Barcelona, China, these sort of races where they look ordinary because he's driving at such a level that he's under no pressure. But I still think with it, you've got the feeling that Norris isn't yet 100% comfortable with the car. So I do agree maybe the peak for Lando could be higher, like we saw last year, if he can get confidence and just feel at one with the car again. And we know that Oscar seems happier with the car as it is. Lando's still trying to find ways around it with the suspension change that came in Canada. And if he can find a groove, I do wonder if he's got another couple of percent to be sort of more routinely ahead. But he's still got to go and find it.
If Oscar Piastri loses the World Championship by 7 points or less, he's going to come to rue that penalty at Silverstone. You've already said that it was a harsh penalty, JP. Just tell us why.
I think there's a couple of things here. I don't think he's done anything extraordinarily wrong. He's obviously backed up the field on the safety car restart. He's hit reasonable brake pressure to slow the car down, but I just don't see it as a major moment. He'd done exactly the same thing 4 laps before that actually almost caused a little bit more drama further back in the field with Nico Hülkenberg not being happy and had to take a bit of avoiding action. But that one, the FIA didn't even look at it. They reportedly weren't best pleased and were debating whether they were going to look at it, but they just fundamentally didn't. So then to give quite a significant penalty 4 laps later for something that was, to me, looked really innocuous, it's harsh. And also, we've been following this sport a long time. Can you guys remember a single penalty for this sort of infringement before? Because I can't. Someone being erratic. George Russell wasn't even investigated in Canada for something pretty not that comparable, but ultimately, a similar offence. And Red Bull appealed it and it was thrown out. I can't remember a single driver ever getting pinged for this. So for Oscar to lose a race win for something that caused no real drama further back, I know Max overtook him, but they sorted themselves out. I don't think there was bad intent. There was no advantage gained. I've never seen someone penalised for it in the past. And then he loses a British Grand Prix win. That I could feel his frustration at the end of the race.
The Montreal Russell Mercedes example you give, Russell did apply only 50% of the brake pressure that Oscar did at Silverstone. I don't know how significant that is, but
they're not.
I do wonder. Do you think Max was Max gaming it a bit? Do you think he shot past him?
I think he wasn't bothered about
exaggerate
passing
the point.
He was absolutely. He didn't brake as hard as he could. That's clear. I mean, I've looked at the data, and just 4 corners earlier, coming out of Copse before Maggots, there's a nice long stretch. Oscar does the same thing, and he was routinely braking at 60 psi brake pressure. That was not an extraordinary amount. He's doing it every lap. Every lap at the same point on the hangar straight, he's hitting that brake pressure. It's not shocking. I think in the stewards document, everyone's clinging on to, 60 psi is so much. Formula One cars can brake more than double that. So I know George braked, at 30 psi, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. That's an incident that wasn't punished and is very different. So it's all about the relativity of it. And Oscar was doing it routinely. Max before was able to brake at 60 psi and stop. And at that point, when he went past Oscar, he braked at about 40 psi and went past him.
Well, don't panic, Oscar. We've only got Spa next. We get a lot of safety cars there.
He won't do it again. I'm assured of that.
Look, any other significant moments in the first 12 races between these two guys, Lawrence?
Well, I think go way back to that first race in Australia where Lando handled the conditions 100% perfectly and Oscar handled them 99.9%, and then obviously had that off and it cost him some big points. And I think there have been some moments maybe where Oscar hasn't shown up as well as Lando. But I think they actually didn't really start to come together, really, did they, until the last couple of races where we actually got to see them wheel-to-wheel racing. And that's partly why I said right at the beginning that I'm a little bit sad that we are coming back to the summer break, because I feel like we're starting to get some momentum in this fight. And I think now it's become incredibly, increasingly clear that it's going to be probably a 2-horse race for the Drivers' Championship. I imagine that will change their mindset, in the way that they are going to go racing going forward, because it's just those two now. Max is 69 points adrift, is more than likely going to fall further back. And so I think it kind of starts now, the real title battle between the two.
So I was looking through this, and actually Max could so easily still be in this title fight as well. But those recent races have really put him out. If you think of the points that he's lost through kind of a bit of bad luck, really. You've got a whack in Austria, as well as an unlucky qualifying that's cost him 15 points. The safety car in Barcelona, and then, his subsequent red mist. But without the safety car, he's an easy third. And then you've got the rain falling that wasn't forecast at Silverstone when he had done the hard work to put a low downforce Red Bull on pole. If those hadn't have happened, that's 44 more points for Max, and he'd be within a race win still, or on a race win of the McLarens. So I feel like he's been quite unlucky in the recent races to be as far adrift as he is. But it does mean that McLarens are in a straight fight now, surely. And I think, for me, the China race, where Oscar managed to get on top of Lando, and we started to see Lando's braking issues and struggling to connect with the car, that was quite a big one, because it got Oscar the momentum earlier on in the season to start to apply the pressure and undo the damage of Melbourne. And then you've also got Austria, where Lando managed to recover from Canada, and in a straight fight, they didn't have contact. In fact, it was almost Oscar that was nearly causing the contact and had to be told to calm it down. They're kind of, to me, two big moments.
Do you think it'll go down to the wire, to the last race in Abu Dhabi?
I don't see why not. Yeah. We've got to hope, haven't we? We've got 11 more races for them to be this close. But the thing is that it's just ebbing and flowing. There's no guarantee who's going to be ahead of them in the next race. And that goes kind of for any race at the moment. So hopefully it keeps nudging one way or the other and we get a showdown. It would be so nice to get a showdown.
Bring it on. What about Ferrari then? After finishing 14 points behind McLaren at the end of last year, they're now 238 points adrift of them. Lewis Hamilton won the sprint race in China and Charles Leclerc has had 4 podiums, but they haven't won a Grand Prix this year. And team principal Fred Vasseur has come under pressure in the Italian media. Let's start with Lewis. Your thoughts on his first 12 races in red?
For me, in the TV pen, it's been a reasonably bleak experience interviewing Lewis because he's been so down, I think, this year. I think he'd come in with so much optimism, obviously had that great weekend in great sprint day in China. And then it just hasn't really worked for him. And there's been a couple of things that have been repetitive. You know, he's talking about the brakes and just how he can't get comfortable with the brakes, and he's never experienced this before in his career. And there have been a couple of things where he just hasn't felt that comfortable. And then maybe I'd say in the last 2 races, Austria and here, since Ferrari have brought this floor upgrade, that significant tweak to the floor and to the diffuser, there's been a little bit of a change in body language, I think, from Lewis. Look, he's still nowhere near where he wants to be in terms of ultimate competitiveness, but it's felt like he's been able to have a more consistent car. One thing he's often said to me is that he comes to a race weekend, he doesn't know what car he's going to get, doesn't know how that weekend's going to unfold. And we haven't really had that kind of chat or that language use in the last couple of races. Look, it's a sample of 2, but I think really the first 10 races were quite difficult and frustrating and irritating for Lewis. And maybe the last 2 races have been something of a corner turn for him.
Yeah, I you have to say it's been disappointing. Let's be honest. This is a Lewis Hamilton with Ferrari, the matchup that we were all hoping was going to be a chance for a title bid, and he's doesn't seem like he's anywhere near his best right now and in harmony with the car. I agree. I thought Silverstone looked like it was going to be the best of Lewis again until he didn't quite nail that final qualifying lap. But it was the best I've seen from him this year, maybe since the China sprint as a one-off earlier on. He looked like every lap he was quick. That was the good thing for Hamilton in Silverstone. It was not just a stint here, a lap there. It was every lap in practice and in qualifying that he was a little bit ahead of Charles mostly, and Ferrari would bang on the pace. Obviously, the execution then was a bit disappointing. Hopefully, it is, as you say, Lawrence, it's just showing that he is getting more comfortable with the car, and these upgrades are getting him a little bit more suited to it. Austria was better. But this is Lewis Hamilton, guys. He's not signed to be a decent number 2 to Charles Leclerc either. This was a big money signing to get Ferrari back on the top step, and they are miles away from it in the big picture here. Obviously, McLaren have got a great car, but Lewis hasn't been on the podium in a Grand Prix conditions yet. So hopefully the trajectory is good, but you can't say that this has been anything but disappointing at the moment.
You say disappointing, but do you think he's driven a better season to date than he did last year at Mercedes?
It's difficult to tell, isn't it? Because I personally think it's probably been a little bit harder for him this year than last year. He'd already had the British Grand Prix win, didn't he? And he was about to get the Belgian Grand Prix win as well. And at least the race pace last year looked like it was better, even if he was being out-qualified by George. But then he was much more happy and confident with Mercedes still. He was still working with Bono, and all of these teething issues that he has at Ferrari, he was not about to be having in his 11th year with Mercedes. So it's a difficult comparison. But the other thing is the teammate's different as well. And George is having a brilliant season once again this year, showing how good he is. But I also think Charles is really, really an exceptional driver at Ferrari. So, when we knew he was going to be teammates with Leclerc, you never thought it was going to be a walk in the park for even a Hamilton end of 2023 having a really great season. You still thought that's going to be a close matchup. And it's just for the first half, it's been tough going for him.
Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? There's talk of the suspension upgrade coming at Spa.
I think there is. I think there is a light. It finally feels like Ferrari are potentially on the right pathway. I think there is some regret internally that they took so much of a different pathway with the car. They changed so much of it over the winter. I think, it's always a risk, and that risk can go one of two ways. It can really pay off and you can make that big step, or you could take a step back, and that's obviously what's happened this year. They were on the precipice, weren't they? They were fine for the Constructors' Championship, on the precipice of actually winning the Constructors' Championship. So I think there is some real frustration that the car that they've gone to, when they've taken the risk and they've tried something different, hasn't worked out this year. So I think for them to bring that upgrade a couple of races ago, and for it to have worked, and for both drivers to feel a little bit more comfortable with the car, is a good thing. Obviously, all of the teams have either turned off or are about to turn off the taps on development for this year, because 2026, they can't afford a slow start there. So how much better this year it can be is an unknown, and it's unlikely that they're going to make a big step. But I think for Lewis, probably what he's found is that it's taken more of an adjustment to fit into his new team. I think he probably felt like he had the experience to do so, and he's met a Ferrari team where everything is just so different, in the way that when you talk to Carlos Sainz, it's so different moving from Ferrari to Williams. There is just so much to learn, and so much to kind of train your brain again to do, that actually maybe he just needs the second half of the season to focus on getting all of that right. I know this isn't the Lewis Hamilton that we want to see, and this isn't what Lewis was expecting, but I think the reality is he probably just needs to bed in for the rest of this year so that he can hit the ground running, providing Ferrari deliver a good car next year.
Do you think they can win a race?
Yeah. They'll win a race before the end of the year, I think.
Where?
I think it was Singapore. They should have a good chance when you look at the performance that they had in Monaco. Even Monza, they're always competitive at Monza. That would be the fairy tale story for either driver, but obviously Hamilton, who's not won there in Ferrari colours before. They've had chances this year. Monaco, Leclerc was on provisional pole, and then the McLarens did that second run, which got him. But on a like-for-like, one set of tyres, one lap, he was ahead. And Canada, again, Leclerc crashed on Friday, did no laps, and still was halfway through his final lap, looking like he was going to be challenging for pole, at least the front row. And then Silverstone, both of them could have put it on the front row at the very least. I think they could have had pole. Certainly Hamilton lost a chunk of time in the final couple of corners. I was down in Parc Fermé ready to interview. I was watching the times come in. I thought this is going to be the Hamilton pole at Silverstone, because he was absolutely nailing it through 15 of the 18 corners. But then you could just see him get a little bit wide coming into the braking zone for Club and lost it. But the potential's definitely there. And I would be amazed if they don't get a win this year.
You've just listed a whole bunch of tracks, different speeds, different types of corners. So you singled out Singapore, but maybe we don't have to wait that long. I mean, what about Hungary, where Hamilton has always been brilliant round there?
Yeah, I still wouldn't have thought Hungary would necessarily be the best track. But like you say, the form guide is, we're talking tiny amounts separating the best of the four teams. So it could be anywhere. Still, I think the theory was, the lower speed, shorter corners were better for Ferrari. But then that is the exact opposite of Silverstone, where I wasn't expecting them to be quick, and they could have had a front row lockout. So it shows the form guide this year could throw anything up.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. In any high-stakes environment, whether it's the Formula One paddock or running a business, trust and preparation are everything. And when it comes to proving your company is secure and compliant, it's not just important for growth, it's essential. Vanta makes it automatic. They help businesses prove they take security and compliance seriously without drowning in spreadsheets or dragging out long audits. Whether you're a startup facing your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a growing company managing vendor risk, Vanta makes the whole process faster, simpler, and easier to scale. You can automate compliance for more than 35 frameworks and complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, thanks to its industry-leading AI and automation, leaving your team time to focus on the bigger picture. And the results speak for themselves. According to a recent IDC study, Vanta customers save over $500,000 a year and are 3 times more productive. Visit vanta.com/nation to sign up for a free demo today. That's vanta.com/nation. Mercedes have had a mixed season as well. George Russell has been on the podium 4 times and converted pole into victory at the Canadian Grand Prix. Kimi Antonelli has shown glimpses of why Toto Wolff put faith in him at such a young age, taking a sensational sprint pole in Miami and securing his first F1 podium in Montreal. But, like Ferrari, Merc are way off the pace of McLaren. So guys, what's your assessment of their season so far? It appears they've dropped off a bit.
I think they'll frankly just be irritated that this is another season where how hot it is will determine how good a weekend that they're going to have. You know, ever since these new regulations were introduced, Mercedes just haven't been on top of the aero side and on the top of the chassis side. And I think that is probably a greater worry for them, given there's another change to the regulations next year. And I think even George has said in the media that there is no guarantee that even if they are making progress in their understanding of it, that they are going to get it right next year. And then can you imagine the pain that they would be in if they don't, and they don't understand why they can't get their car to work when the temperatures start to rise? I think that given all of that, they've had a pretty decent year. George had a really strong start to the year. I think he's outperformed that car. I think that Kimi has shown the talent in certain races. You mentioned Miami, where it shows what he is capable of doing. But I think ultimately they thought they were going to make a step on this year and they haven't. So when all said and done, they'll just frankly see this as a massive disappointment. And I think it will be a worry that they've fallen even further back. It doesn't really matter that they're, much of a muchness with Ferrari and Red Bull. It is that gap, and that significant gap to McLaren, who they obviously supply power units to, which will be incredibly irritating.
It's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Because if you took McLaren out of this, we'd probably have really different debriefs on everyone else. Because Ferrari would be then at the top. They're second in the constructors, and yet we're saying it's been incredibly disappointing. Mercedes would have been right up there and won more than the one race. But just McLaren have done such a good job with the car, and the two drivers are generally clear of the field, that it's making everyone else look pretty ordinary. I know Max would then be having another sail-away season, but trying to match up to what McLaren have done with the car is obviously a very difficult task for everyone in the field. The sentiment's the same. I think Mercedes, they haven't made any significant progress from where they were. One win on a circuit they were really good at last year in Canada is the same thing. They're good on a certain day in cooler temperatures on a track that suits them, but they don't have the consistency at all. I think George Russell's probably having the season of his career at the moment. I think he's driving really well to do a good job in that car, but he doesn't have the machinery to fight with the rest on the regular.
You feel he's really stepped up into that team leader role?
Yeah, I think it's just the consistency of his performance and dragging things out of it when it looks like the sort of hope is lost. Even if you take Silverstone again, this is one that sort of goes against their cooler temperatures, because it was chilly at Silverstone throughout the whole weekend. And I thought, like last year, they had a front row lockout. If the temperature is simply a form guide for Mercedes, they should have been right at the front again at Silverstone, but they were having a difficult weekend. But Russell did manage to execute a really great Q3 lap and put it almost on the top three from nowhere, and got himself ahead of the Ferraris. They didn't have the pace to be ahead of the Ferraris, but George did a good individual lap to put him there. And we saw it last year. The gap from Russell to Hamilton was pretty impressive. But now Hamilton's not there. We're seeing him just kind of relentlessly being ahead of Antonelli, showing him the way and trying to fight with the others.
It was a wasted opportunity, Silverstone, wasn't it? In that, I don't know, what were you guys thinking as Russell pitted at the start of the race?
I thought he was going to win the race.
You thought it was the right call?
Yeah, I did. I was watching it with on commentary with DC, and we'd been down on the grid, and it started off drying, then it rained as we were on the grid, and then it was drying, and it looked like it was drying quite quickly again. So we both got up to the commentary box, and we were chatting off air before the formation lap, and we were saying, is someone going to do it? And when you then saw the cars on the formation lap, it looked really, really dry all the way through until Stowe. And, there was a dry line, the sun was peeking out, and you just thought this could be that Budapest race where everyone dives in, Budapest 21, and Hamilton's the only one left on the grid. So when Russell and Leclerc pitted, at the time I thought it's a gamble, but it's a gamble I would have taken. And obviously, I'd have been wrong to take it as well. But there was a few things that went. I think the number of safety cars in that first stint didn't help them. It was VSC, so it didn't bunch the pack up, and it just meant they couldn't get the slick tyres working. And others then had cheaper pit stops, like your Antonelli and your Strolls, to come out ahead. So we didn't see it play out in a sort of fair battle, but I still think it was obviously not the right call.
And I think the fact that he took that risk kind of shows the bind that the team are in at the minute, that, you know, obviously if the performance were there, George wouldn't have had to take that kind of risk at the minute, but it was kind of a roll of the dice situation in the same way that Charles kind of chose to roll the dice as well. Could have turned out to be a hero, but in the end he didn't.
But also it shows how confident he is in his position at the team, that he's prepared to roll the dice like that. I think you only do that if you're very confident.
Yeah, but this is a guy that's overruled the team in Belgium last year to deliver one of the best strategic driver calls and take the flag first. Okay, he was desperately unlucky and got the DQ, but George he's a smart driver. He's always thinking about how he can get something more out of it from the strategy point of view. And even in Brazil last year was leading and was really peeved that he listened to the team to take the pit stop before the red flag that would have won in the race. So he's a smart driver. And I just think with Mercedes and Ferrari, if they had have got it right, they would have been at the front. And any of those teams on that day had the pace to win. So it was just about trying to get yourself to the front. And from starting fourth, behind the two McLarens, and Max as well, you're just thinking this is a tough one. Whereas if you get the call right and you're at the front, then Russell's the winner, or Leclerc's the winner if Russell doesn't pit, and we're all saying it's genius. And it must have been a marginal call for the amount of drivers that are feeling the grip on the formation lap to come in and take it. And
it would appear, wouldn't it, that all the contractual situation for him, you know, not having a deal for 2026, it doesn't seem to be affecting his performance in the car, which I find extraordinary and a huge compliment to him.
I think it's actually galvanised him, really. I think he's really, really taken something from it. I think during his time with Lewis, I don't think he felt he got the plaudits for the kind of performance he put in there. I think he's levelled up this year, and I think, you know, lots of people rate Kimi Antonelli highly, and he has done exactly what he needed to do. He stepped up into the team leader role. To Jolyon's point, he's really continued to lead from the cockpit as well when he's trying to command a race as well, or making decisions then. And I think, if anything, it's making him come out as a stronger driver. And yeah, okay, it's annoying that they haven't put pen to paper yet on his Mercedes deal, potentially because Max is available. But George will know that he's in still a pretty good spot, right? Because if Max goes to Mercedes, there's going to be a spot at Red Bull. I know there aren't a great deal of other options elsewhere, but I think George has done enough, and he backs himself critically, and he believes in himself, that I think he feels like whatever happens, he's going to be okay, as long as he keeps driving and doing the job on track.
Now, when it comes to the midfield, Williams are winning the battle at the moment, having been comfortable in P5 for most of the season. But a dip in form has coincided with Sauber scoring more points than Red Bull in the last 4 races, capped off with Nico Hülkenberg's amazing first F1 podium at Silverstone last time out. They're up to P6, just 18 points adrift of Williams now. I mean, Jolyon, let's start with you and get your thoughts on your former teammate's first podium.
Outstanding, wasn't it? It was just great to see, because all of the stories, you don't want Nico Hülkenberg to end up retiring from Formula One without a podium. He's just too talented for that. So it was about time. 239 races, but I thought it was the best of Hulk, to be honest. It wasn't a mass overtaking, carving his way through, but it was a really methodical drive. He used his experience to have the right pit calls. He didn't take my formation lap pit stop, which was right. But then he did take the new set of inters at the first chance, which was the genius, and it propelled him up. And from there, you know, he's just a consummate pro that's driving at a high level. He's really fast. He doesn't make mistakes, and that's what we saw. He passed Stroll and held off Hamilton in the Ferrari, which is a great effort. So great job, and I'm actually really pleased for the Sauber team as well. Their reaction for the podium was what you want to see underneath the podium, wasn't it? Some chanting, team absolutely loving life. And they deserve to, because they've obviously produced a car now with upgrades that's capable of getting points with both drivers.
And Lawrence, how much more can Sauber achieve this year? Are they a genuine threat to Williams' P5?
I mean, if we were talking about this 3 races ago, we would have said that Williams had probably near enough nailed P5 in the Constructors' Championship, just because of such, not just their strong start, but the ruthless consistency. I think they had 4 races where they had both cars in the points, in a way that other midfield teams weren't able to match. But yeah, absolutely, I think Sauber have got the momentum. That stat is extraordinary. That they've scored more points than Red Bull in the last few races. That is extraordinary. I think the way that Jonathan Wheatley and Mattia Binotto are running the team has really galvanised them. I think there's some real momentum and belief there again. I think that team have gone through some real tough times in the last decade, really, and they've not put any less work in than everyone else on the grid. It's just the performance hasn't come. So I think when you get that kind of success, you do see results. Everyone works a little bit harder. Things tend to go in your way. You tend to build up momentum. And I think Sauber are a real genuine contender now, because they always said that even though Audi are coming in next year, they never wanted to write last year and this year off. It was important for them to perform well on track. And so I think this is proof of that. It's proof of some of the changes that Mattia Binotto has put in back at the factory. Jonathan Wheatley was very nice and humble in saying that really none of this is to do with him, because he only came in 3 months ago. But I think that it is a lot of fruit of the work that's been put in behind the scenes. And we're seeing Nico Hülkenberg living his best life. And I think when you've got Nico on song like this, and it's been the case throughout his career, he can generate incredible consistency. And I think now that he's got a car that is giving him the opportunity to score points for that consistency, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't continue like this.
So a stat that I quite like on this, Hülkenberg has scored points on 5 races from 12, so nearly half the races now. Do you know what his average grid position is when he's getting those points?
Low.
16.5.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's not even making Q2, guys, and he's getting through to the points. So I feel like it shows what a great job he's doing on Sundays. The classic Hülkenberg skill was qualifying, but he's actually, not doing so well on Saturdays at the moment. I feel like if Sauber are going to challenge Williams, that has to get better. I think they have to qualify higher up, because now that they're looking like a threat, I don't think we're going to see these stealth Hülkenberg rises to the points, because you'll get an Albon or a Sainz starting to cover him off when he pits really early, or they'll start looking at him now, because the amount of times he's been 19th, 18th, 17th on the grid, and you're like, how has he done that? And you look through afterwards and you just say, wow, he pitted so early and just had great race pace, because no one's pitted to cover him off. They're like, Hülkenberg in a Sauber, we'll let him go. That won't keep happening now. He's getting close, I don't think.
There is one team, maybe one driver that we haven't mentioned yet. Fernando Alonso, 400 and however many races, and as formidable as ever. Lawrence, what do you make of the job he's done so far this year?
Well, firstly, I thought it was remarkable that he went 8 races without scoring points, and now he's on a run of 4 races inside the points. I think the job that Fernando has done there at a team who are clearly struggling with a number of things, from trying to gel this incredible infrastructure that they've built, from the new wind tunnel to the simulator to the factory to all of the new people that they've brought in, including Adrian Newey. They're clearly struggling to kind of get on top of all of that. And then for Fernando then to make the most of a new update that has come onto the car, and then bring back that trademark consistency that tends to lead to the language that he uses, that, he's still performing the best that he's ever performed 20 years after he made his debut. I think what he's doing there is incredible. And it's also interesting within the prism of, we're talking a lot about, what Max is going to do in the future, how Aston Martin are going to have to think about what they're going to do going forward. I don't think Fernando's got any intention of slowing up anytime soon. I think he's really been galvanised by Adrian Newey. They've spent a lot of time together since Adrian's joined. I think he's got real belief that if they can turn things around next year and beyond, he is still the guy performing at the maximum to try and make the most of that package. And so I think for Formula One, it is great to see. I think it's great to see that consistency that he's delivered. And also, he's just a great character to have around. So yeah, I think he's done a great job so far this year.
I've got an F1 TV feature for you, Loz. I'd love you guys to be in there with a camera when Newey and Alonso are debriefing after a session. Just two great brains, two great Formula One people. It would be a fascinating conversation to listen to, wouldn't it?
How long have they waited to work together as well? The mutual respect there is through the roof. So I don't know if we'll necessarily get the same team radio messages coming back when there's a Adrian Newey built car that's on the other end of it and a whole team galvanised to try and get back towards the front end. I think the respect there is going to be immense. We'll make it, TC.
Guys, it's been a brilliant chat. Come on then. Who's going to win the World Championship?
McLaren.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I think Oscar's probably going to edge Lando out of it because I think the consistency will probably be enough for him to do it. But I'm hoping that we get to Abu Dhabi and we don't know what the result is until then.
I think Lando might find a run in the second half of the season and just put 3 or 4 races together, which will decide the shape of the title. I think Norris will find his feet to get it.
Do you think McLaren will get involved in any way when it comes to team orders?
No. They can't, can they? They've got no leg to stand on to jump in the way now because, as Lawrence has rightfully predicted, they will win the constructors already. So it's just who wins the drivers.
Yeah, I think they just don't need to. That's what the beauty of it is, isn't it? That's why it's set up so perfectly is they could just let them crack on, they can just do what they need to do. And also, if they do come together, it doesn't matter because there's brand new cars next year. So they'll have to make do with whatever spares they've got left. So they could just crack on.
So what are you saying, TC? What's your prediction?
I actually would go with Lawrence on this one. I think it's going to go down to the wire. And I think if you come to a World Cup final in Abu Dhabi, I think just Oscar's personality will win through if it goes down to the wire. There you go. 2 Oscars, 1 Lando here on F1 Nation.
So you know what? If they get to the last race shootout and they are level on points, I would switch back to an Oscar at that moment. but my theory is that Lando will do enough to get a lead before the final race. And he'll do it. Hopefully it'll be a showdown, but he'll have some points in hand at that point. But Oscar, otherwise, on a final race is going to be tough to beat with that coolness.
All right, guys, it's been a wonderful chat. Thank you both very much for your time, and I'll see you in Spa.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, TC. See you then.
And to keep across all the latest Formula One news, go to Formula1.com or the official F1 app, and you can follow at F1 on social media. We will, of course, be back next Monday with our preview of the Belgian Grand Prix, but for now, thank you very much for listening. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.